What's your background? How did you get into men's work?
Yeah, so I've been a men's guide since, about 2017, 2018. But my journey to becoming a leader in men's work started with just getting involved in it myself in my 20s back in like 2006. I think I dove into my first men's group and really transformed things for me in terms of done a lot of different types of modalities and work. And having been in groups now for about 20 years or so, it's the thing that's moved the needle the most for me in my life. And to be totally honest, I just got so passionate about it. I just kept talking about my own personal group all the time. Guys started asking me like, oh, what is that? How do I join? Can I come? And the group I was in for, about 14 years before I moved, we just met in a therapist's office. So I was like, no, there's no room. Literally can't have any more guys in the room. And that's when I started leading my own groups and saying, well, cool, you can come check out this one. I'm doing a kind of a drop-in group. And I've just become more and more passionate about it ever since then.
Awesome. This is a question that keeps popping into my mind because I've been having a hard time trying to define it. And I think I'm having a hard time defining it because I think there's always a way that you can reshape the definition depending on who you're talking to. And there's more to it I can do. But what is your idea of healthy masculine?
Yeah, totally. It's a hot topic these days. I think what I'll start with is what it's not, in a sense. And it might be a little counterintuitive here, but I, for one, don't believe in a toxic masculine or toxic masculinity. What I don't like about that term is it makes it seem like it's just purely toxic and there's nothing you can do about it. I'm much more a proponent of there's such thing as pathological, which just means we've grown awry. Something in our system has grown in an unhealthy way, but that it can be mended. And so for me, healthy masculinity is comprised of three components, as I say. One, it's deeply connected to our bodies. So we're actually embodied. We're in our bodies. We're grounded. And we're like rooted in a calm, regulated nervous system. It's kind of the foundational. So it's grounded, it's rooted, it's still, it's embodied, which then allows for, second component is it also has access to its heart. So it's connected. Healthy masculinity is actually connected to the environment, the world, to people around us, to different parts of ourselves. So we're open. We're sensitive, we can attune, we can know what we're feeling, we can sense into what other people are feeling. And that's what allows for that connection. So we're grounded in our bodies, we're open and sensitive in our hearts. And then the last piece, which tends to get a pretty bad rap for a lot of men, because it has to do with the head, get out of your head, get out of your head, you're stuck in your head as men. That's not a problem when these other two pieces are online.
Yeah.
And so the last piece is it's actually deeply aware in the moment of what's most important. What's most important for me to put my attention on in any given interaction, in any given moment in my life? What's going to lead to the most depth and love and really consciousness in a sense? So healthy masculinity actually involves all three. We're grounded and connected in our bodies. We're open and attuned in our hearts and our relationships. And then we're deeply aware of our surroundings, our life, our context, and we have a capacity to intentionally direct our awareness. And we can choose what we want to focus on, in a sense. And when we have all three of those, masculinity is this incredibly grounding, powerful, loving, safety-generating force in the world that anybody can cultivate, but I think is particularly important for us men to cultivate.
So then the hot topic is the opposite, is what's the healthy feminine? Because every time I have one of these definitions come out, it's like you're grounded, you're focused. Does that mean feminine is all over the place and can't focus on it? And then it's, that's like a lot of this mostly online vitriol. Sure. And the question being like, well, then how do you flip side that?
Yeah, they're very similar in a sense, and that it's still going to be in the body, right? So there's a deep connection to the body, really important for femininity, embodiment, heart open. The emphasis on attention is what's different. So in the feminine, the simplest metaphor we often use is the masculine is what provides the structure to the moment. So it's like the banks of the river. The feminine is everything that's going to flow through it. It's the water flowing through it. Or one of my other favorite metaphors I heard is, the masculine part of any of us is what builds the house. The feminine is what fills the house and makes it a home. So you can think about, what does it mean to step into a space and it feels like home?
Yeah,
That's the feminine part of us.
I'm actually in a men's group right now with, you might know, Connor Beaton.
Uh-huh.
I'm in one of his his high-end self-leadership program, and I just spoke yesterday to the group, and I've had this issue where it comes on and off over time. And I've kind of coined it as like a nihilistic contrarian. The idea being like, you take an idea and you're like, I want to do this. And well, here's 3 reasons why it's a bad idea. I'm like, oh,
Sure.
okay. And I shouldn't do it. Well, here's 3 reasons why you should try it out. Like, you just told me it was a bad idea. Like, it is a bad idea. So it's a bad idea. No, it's not a bad idea. And it's like, what he kind of pointed out very quickly is like, it sounds like you're just afraid to try. You're afraid of failure. And I've had a lot of these discussions about like, so we say like if the masculine is built in the house and the feminine makes it a home, and like the flip side becomes like, well, does that mean women can't build homes?
Nope.
Or feminine can't build homes? And it's like trying to get to this core root, untouchable idea of like what it means for healthy masculine, healthy feminine, to the point that you can't take it and flip it somehow in a toxic way. I think that's the crux of the biggest issue we see in the discourse of the conversation, of people saying like, well, does that mean the opposite thing is, this, whatever it may be, and then trying to find a way like, well, here's the core and you can't touch this.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things come to mind, on the more toxic masculine side, often what we see, when I talk about pathological masculine, part of what's beat into, frankly, a lot of men is don't share anything. Hold it all inside. Hold it all. Don't share vulnerability. Don't share weakness. Don't share fear. Be tough, right? Keep it all inside. The flip, the pathological version of the feminine, is express without any constraint. It's just whatever you're feeling, bring it forward without any attunement to the people you're bringing it forward in, right? So there's just like a live wire energy of expression that can be pretty damaging sometimes.
Yeah.
With both of them, right, we want this healthy middle. And the important thing to remember here is we all have both. So I don't care who you think the most manly man in the world is, he has an inner feminine. And the most feminine woman in the planet has an inner masculine. We have both of these capacities, and part of what's happening in our planet right now is we're being asked to cultivate both. Now, it turns out a lot of men who are born in a biologically male body tend to, have more of a home base in the masculine, and vice versa for the feminine, but it's not always that case. And a lot of men's work, frankly, a lot of men's work I do with guys is actually about developing their healthy feminine. So learning to express, learning to feel, learning to let go of things, learning to give themselves permission to feel good in their bodies. It's huge for a lot of men. Hey, you're allowed to feel good. You don't have to feel like crap all the time, right? In that we have both capacities inside of us. And you can definitely see in the world, actually, a lot of men who are pretty damaging in the planet. One of the reasons they are is they have a pathological feminine. They have no capacity to regulate themselves. If they get angry, they attack, right? If they explode in rage, when you really think about that, what that is that's pathological feminine. That's just pure expression without any consideration for the impact of the environment or the people. It's like pushing our feelings out on people. And we see a lot of highly reactive men who have no ability to contain their emotions. Doesn't mean repress them, but there's a huge difference. And you can actually talk to a lot of women about this, between a man who just explodes in rage and a man who can take the step and say, I'm feeling really angry right now. feeling a lot of heat in my chest and my belly, and my hands want to hit something. The man that can say that is aware of his anger and is 10,000 times safer than the man who just is the anger.
I like that. The self-awareness thing. Yeah, and this is something that's been interesting to learn about with a lot of people. It's funny how often it comes back to just things like breath work, group work, and people are like, what's the magic pill? What's the thing I could take? Can I just do this one simple trick? And it's just like, no, it's way more complicated than, I'm not saying it's complicated, but it's simple, but it's not fun.
Easy. And that's the, unfortunate social media ification of life, is just do these 5 things and you'll be cured forever, because it fits into a 2-minute reel, and it's easier to sell. It's much easier to sell. Come to this weekend workshop and you'll be fixed forever. And frankly, you can have some big movement, but life transformation takes integration and time, in my experience. And that's a lot harder to sell. This is going to be a process you're going to be engaged in the rest of your life, for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Well, I guess I would say it gets easier, but the brunt of the work I think it's mostly up front. Because once you get to a point that you feel comfortable expressing yourself and feel comfortable disclosing your thoughts on a regular basis, it's more like taking the trash out once a week versus taking out an entire fucking dumpster that's been sitting in your basement for 10 years.
There's less of a backlog, and
things
move more to subtle. So you start to have subtler and subtler manifestations of some of the patterns, that it's like peeling back the layers of the onion. There is always another layer of the onion. I've never met anyone who hasn't found that. And anyone who does, I would not trust them, frankly. I got to figure it out. I'm cured. I'm fixed. Right? That's when you get into crazy gurus who often do a lot of damage.
Yeah.
But it does get more subtle, and there's less of a backlog. So certainly what I've seen in the transformational world is it's like things move more towards real time. So when we first start getting to the work, we've got a lifetime of junk we need to process. But as we do the work, that moves more and more towards, as it actually comes up in my nervous system, I can work with it right then and there. So I don't have to carry it forward. It's like more of a real-time metabolism.
I think we as a culture have become so indoctrinated into avoidance. Like, just try not to feel your feelings, do things or numb out. Video games, porn, Netflix, junk food eating, whatever it may be. Don't push yourself. And a lot of the research around the neuroscience of change and things like that basically states like you cannot process, you cannot change without experiencing emotion. So it's like when we say to you, like, you're going to have to cry your eyes out for a couple of days. It's like, is there any other way? Like, nope. There's literally no other way to do this aside from just do it. Because again, like that backlog you mentioned a second ago is so effing big that we got to just start to work through it slowly. And it's interesting to see how we have like an unintentional, say, biological mechanism to numb out in the form of like because corpus callosum have like a kind of attaches from the right side of the brain where a lot of that emotional memory is stored, and you can't access it because you've cut off that connection for so long. And how something as simple as just sit and meditate for 15 minutes a day will start to strengthen that connection, so that when we ask you how you're feeling, you'll actually be able to tell us.
Yeah. A lot of men, again, like I was saying, a lot of men's work is actually inner feminine work. And how I would name that is developing our capacity for interoception. It's our awareness of what's happening inside our bodies, and then our ability to express that. And most of us men are not trained in that. This is the man box kind of patriarchy stuff that's real from a young age. We're taught, be tough, stop crying, which when you really think about it, what it's saying is disconnect from what you're feeling inside, override it with your head. And we get into school and, boys biology, we need to move our bodies. And what do they tell us at school? Sit still. Stop moving. Those impulses you're feeling in your body, override them. Override them. Then we get into adolescence and puberty and locker rooms, and the culture tends to be you bring anything forward, a feeling, you're going to get attacked for it. You might literally get bullied for it. You might get ostracized for it. So, okay, once again, just disconnect. Don't share any of that. Then we get out into the workforce, and what are we rewarded for as men? Oh yeah, he works 80 hours a week. He's such a hard worker. Like, man, yeah, he's really doing a lot for his firm. Meanwhile, his body's being destroyed. And then for a lot of men, we do a lot of dangerous jobs physically. We do a lot of the jobs that have the most detriment to our bodies. So all these things kind of, hammer together to teach men to be disconnected from our bodies, which means we're disconnected from our feelings. And a lot of the work is reconnecting that so we can start to metabolize a lot of that emotional content, which frees up a lot of life force for us because, don't care who you are as a man, you hit 35, 40, it's like, oh, the battery's not automatically charged every day anymore. I gotta I'm carrying more. And so the more we can free up that held emotional content, the actually more available energy we have to be in the world.
Yeah, I've been up and down on, I guess, my own routines, things like that. Like I started the cold showers for a little bit, then I was doing breath work every day, and then that kind of slowly tapered off, and then I started getting back into video games a little bit too much. And it's been fascinating to almost observe I have enough, it's a gift and a curse, self-awareness to realize I feel like shit right now, to be brutally honest, but I am completely aware of why it happened. I know exactly what I need to do. I know it's going to get better. And because I'm going to eventually, I'm changing some things in my life. I'm actually going to be moving soon to different circumstances, different area, closer to some old friends who are doing very well in life, better social circle. But I'm aware of I haven't been sleeping well. I feel like crap. My thoughts are negative, but I can see it all. And it's been interesting. It's almost unfortunate because I get the feeling that I understand on some level now. When if you took this feeling from me and you compounded it for 20 years, I get why some guys would basically say I don't see any point in living anymore.
Yeah, I'm gonna sign off.
How powerful to say this feels gross for a couple of days. Jesus Christ, what would that be like for the next 30 years? Holy shit.
Totally.
And what's really you're seeing across the board is the men taking their own lives 4-1 or 3-1 compared to women across the board, and wondering what's going on. You mentioned something earlier though about patriarchy, and I think it's an interesting redefinition of it. That because I think what I hear mostly is collective, intentional, voluntary repression of women is the general narrative I hear. Where I think but I think your definition is a little better, where it's more repressed femininity in men is creating controlling circumstance. It's more of a subconscious thing rather than a voluntary thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's both. There's very real, acute things in the world when you look at history and the way religions formed and what was done to the feminine and the midwives. And there's crazy shit there. That was just about power and control because, people that are connected to their sexuality are harder to control. Let's be frank about that. But yeah, what persists now it's this, I'd say particularly here in the West and in America, the myth of the, lone wolf, the rugged cowboy. It's this toughness is the thing that is impenetrable, and we have no vulnerabilities in a sense. And yes, there's tons of examples of how harmful that is to women. But frankly, it's just as harmful to men. This is why we're having this crisis for men, is men are raised in a culture where we're not taught what's happening inside of ourselves. So we can't even name or label it, let alone what do we do with it. And when we have all this really uncomfortable content inside of us and no one's taught us what it is or what to do with it, what do? We turn to what's allowed in our culture. And what's allowed in our culture? Booze, weed, porn, video games, food, anything we can do to numb out and eject from those feelings. And so men turn to the medicines they have, and sometimes they work. At some point, those don't work too. And that's when some men will ultimately eject. And you mix that with this just hyper prioritization of the private here in the West and in America, where success is having my own house with 20 acres away from anyone, where I drive a car and I don't have to share public, I'm isolated, right? Success in our country is isolation, and our nervous systems are not at all created for that. The nuclear family, this shit we're fed, that was created 70 years ago to push people into the suburbs. That's it. It was never done that way before. When you were raised, there was always a nervous system around. Kids were constantly held back in the day. Someone was always holding a kid. That's stuff we need. And more, our culture is getting rid of all that. We're getting rid of public spaces. We're getting rid of shared communities. More and more guys are sitting at home alone, if best finding connection online or through podcasts. But that's very different from being in the room with someone who actually slows down and connects with you and says, hey man, are you okay? Is everything going all right? And then puts a hand on our shoulder, and that hand on our shoulder sends a whole signal to our nervous system. Hey, you're safe. It's okay to feel and let go of this. And suddenly we find ourselves releasing in a way that we often can't do sitting alone home in a room.
Yeah. I'm moving down to the South Carolina, Georgia area probably early next year, closer to some friends of mine from childhood who are really, they're like the guys that I think I need to be around for the long term, that like they're bringing out the best in me, even if it's like, I don't want to hear this, but you're totally right. Things like that. And I had visited them back in July, I think it was, and I hadn't seen them in a while. And we were there, and one night we were going to go out to hit the town, just kind of wandering around, walking, checking out the stores. And before we left, it was like 8 o'clock at night, and I was wired out of my mind. I didn't have any caffeine. Wired out of my mind. Everything's like, what's wrong with you? Like, I don't know. I just feel so fucking good right now. And like a week later, I was like, what the fuck? Oh my God, when's the last time I actually spent physical time with like men that I appreciate being around on like a regular basis? Like, holy shit, it's been a long time. My body was responding in tow, like in a really healthy way. But it's very common, I think, where it's like this death by a thousand cuts, that when you, like for me, feeling like crap, there's a number of different reasons I can point to. But I've had some people ask me like, well, why not try and do affirmations? Why not try to do appreciation things? Like, yeah. But the way I've coined this to myself, and my approach to the men's work is more scientific, because I'm just fascinated with the neuroscience and biology behind the evolution of the stuff. That you can bridge the gap between like, why is breath work so good? Well, here's what's going on in your brain when you do slow breathing. Here's what's going on in your body when you have physical contact with somebody. It's not just like, maybe it's like, back in the day it was energy and chi, and now it's like almost literally your nervous system, like toning down, calming down, turning off the defenses, letting the floodgates out, letting you vent, resetting your equilibrium, all that stuff. The way I've coined it is biological non-negotiables, meaning like you can do as many affirmations as you want, but it doesn't change the fact that we need food, water, healthy intimacy, could include sex, doesn't have to, social contact, sunlight, exercise, clean food, time to decompress. Like, they'll tell somebody, like, if they're feeling depressed, it's like, well, when's the last time you went outside for a walk? When's the last time you talked to somebody? How often do you talk to people? Do you have a long-term intimate relationship? Are you eating clean? Are you exercising? Like, if yes, and you still feel like shit, okay, something else is going on. But more often than not, it's like, get these things figured out first, because your body just can't even operate on like regular unless you're really rounding these things out first. And then from there, ask, okay, if you have everything working out, you're still feeling depressed or something internal. But until you get these out of the way, these are more often than not like big pieces of why you feel like crap. Like I've noticed with myself with like working out and eating clean, I roller coaster. And a big part of that is I don't have I don't have a strong group of people around me that's kind of like holding me accountable without me really realizing it. It's like if you go to the gym, like big box gyms, it's like, maybe if you know some people, you go with some friends, is one thing. But if you go to like a mom and pop gym or a CrossFit and everyone knows your name, holy shit, you're like, I'm ready to just crush it today. I mean, I don't want to, but I don't want to let them down. And I like being here, and they know my name, and they're happy to see me. And it just brings out something in you that you didn't know was even there. But I think people don't, when you start to cut away those things one at a time, like I'm going to eat a couple more burgers this week. I'm going to go outside a little less. I'm not talking as much to my family. I'm not getting as much sunlight. I'm taking a few less walks. And all of a sudden you start to just feel like, I'm feeling okay, but not great. And then it just starts to like slowly, and like all of a sudden you get to this point where you're feeling like, I feel like shit. What happened? What's wrong? I must be depressed.
Totally.
Some SSRIs and things like that. Like, no, look, what was working before? Where are you now?
Well, yeah, not to be too conspiratorial, but it's like, the truth is, when you're in that state, it's easier to sell you shit.
Yeah.
Right? Then you're on Instagram and there's totally an ad for, oh, if you just do this, you're going to feel better. If you just, boom, you'll feel better. And so, I mean, it's not like a conscious people in a dark room making it, but it's something that's just manifested in our culture. And all those things you named are things that happen in your body, right? And the mindset, the affirmations, that's just your head. So you can attack the shit all you want from your head, but if you're not including your body, you're missing a huge part of it. And all those things are also things that if you imagine living more in a kind of tribal community, you'd be doing that every day. That's just
Yeah.
part of you have to be connecting to people just to survive. Again, there's some biological, historical kind of roots here that modernity has kind of blown up for us, and we're having to rediscover now in different ways. How do we recreate these tribes and communities and sense of connection and belonging, and taking care of our body in ways, right? Where, 2,000 years ago, you didn't have to say no to the bag of chips, right? It's like, okay, there's fruit and the fruit's blooming. We can eat it for a couple days here, but there's a natural ending to it. So you didn't have to have a capacity for self-regulation. Our nervous systems it's like totally overwhelmed, whether it's porn or food or dopamine seeking activities now, that like we're having to build these brand new antibodies that no humans did before of, wow, there's unlimited everything. And actually unlimited everything is bad. The only thing that kind of is that unlimited in nature is cancer, and it fucking kills you. Like we need containers on these things, and developing that capacity it's hard work. It's really hard to develop these self structures alone. And what you're speaking to is it's much easier to do in community, right? Once we have some accountability in community, and frankly, it's just more fun. That's part of the reason I love men's groups. It's like, well, I talk to guys about this all the time. It's like, oh yeah, tax season's coming up, really dread it, really don't want to do it. It's like, get on Zoom with a buddy. Hey, let's do our shitty taxes together. Guess what? The work still sucks, but it's a little better. It's like, hey, we can kind of do this horrible thing together, and there's a little play and a little fun, and we can take little breaks. And it turns out doing things relationally almost always makes it easier.
Years ago, how many times I pulled up this like point. I did a rowing crew team back in college, and I'd always refer to it over and over and over again, was like waking up at 4:00 in the morning we had to walk into the water, and it was like on the North Shore in New York, and it was like, just above 45, 50 degree water. It was freezing because we didn't have a dock, because there was like a club sport. And then sweat our asses off, blow out our lungs, and then walk back in the water again to take the boats back because they're so delicate, and then go back and then go through the full day of school and work and all that stuff. And I always just say, like, every fucking morning you wake up, you're like, I do not want to fucking go, and I'm gonna feel like shit if I let them down. Like that, like the idea of knowing I could have shown up and I didn't just feels more disgusting than going. And then more often that you go, you feel great the whole day. But again, like
totally.
it's that built-in sense of community, that tribalism that's going on and underneath the surface that we've really lost. And I had a friend of mine, she mentioned how when her grandfather passed away a couple of years ago, they stopped doing Sunday dinner because it was just that I think her father was like, it's too much work to cook and this. I'm like, it's not the food that you should be doing it for. Like fucking order out if you have to. Like, you guys need to get together on a regular basis. Like, Sunday dinner has so much more going on to it than just, pasta tastes good and I feel like I like grandma's stuffing and whatnot. Like, there's so much extra, and like you're gonna, like I told her, you're gonna see the family's gonna start to like slowly whittle away. Socially, more problems are gonna start rising to stuff. Like, that was a place where you sorted things out. You got to see people, you recharge your batteries. The kids play with each other. They're socialists. They're learning new stuff. And kind of sitting down, slowing down, recharging, tackle the week, come back, sit down. It's just like this ebb and flow to it. Now everyone's just on the climb. More work, more hours, more money, and all of a sudden, finally, it just hits a breaking point and they snap. You wonder what happened. It's like because you were on a fucking roller coaster and you had to come down eventually. Yeah. Yeah, this is crazy shit.
That's frankly, that's when a lot of men come to me to work. When that snap happens, they're like, something's not working anymore. I was told that if I stepped on this escalator and did these things, I'd be happy. And it's kind of a bullshit narrative. We need that community. We need that sense of belonging. That's the other thing, right? When we feel like we belong, we're way more resilient when it comes to life and the stresses of it.
I've heard this with the men's work too, and it's actually when I went to the work with Connor Beaton, he made a point to say that a lot of men are going to come to you when in crisis, more often than not. And I wonder if that's a narrative of a culture or of other things that, like, I'd love to do preventative men's work, but nowadays it's like, wait until you snap and then do something about it. Wait
Yeah, a
until
lot of
you have
guys
a terminal diagnosis, then start working out and
totally.
exercise.
Yeah, a lot of guys won't get up and get off the couch until the pain is so much that they're like, wow, okay, I have to do something different here. You know, I'm hopeful that can change a little bit because there is a stigma, particularly for men, around getting support and therapy. It's all that man box crap we were talking about that is starting to be unwound a little bit. You know, I always use the metaphor for guys. It's like, do you only go to the gym when you're in PT for an injury? No, you go to the gym to take care of your body and make it stronger. You purposely stress it so it can become more resilient. And there's a proactive way counseling, therapy, men's work can be that for our heart and our mind and frankly our bodies as well. That it's like you don't go, you don't have to go when it's just broken. You can go to work yourself out to become stronger and more resilient.
Mm-hmm.
And guys will sometimes take up that metaphor a little bit. But yeah, the honest truth is it does take some kind of crisis for men to wake up to, I need help here. I need to try something different. And, I've in some sense just grown more comfortable with, you just make the invitation and then you have to wait.
Yeah.
And at some point, something will happen. I tell every man, I don't care how strong you are, at some point your body's going to fail you. You won't be able to just push through. You won't be able to do the thing yourself. And the moment your body fails you, your well-being is going to fall down to the level of community you have around you.
So that's powerful. Yeah. I have a cousin. I'll just put it right out there. I'm not going to name any names, but I don't think my family's going to watch this. But for a long time, whenever I saw them at family gatherings, like I kind of kept like a mental log of mostly of generally how people are. I'm just have like a whole mental sense of like, oh, where you're at, what you're doing. When's the last time I talked to you? What did you say then versus what you're saying now? How are things connecting? And I just happen to be naturally observant, like because I do massage therapy, so I kind of have to keep like a flow of like how is the person progressing physically, psychologically, things like that. And over time, every time I saw him, it was like I'd be like meet him for like a handshake, like, "Hey, what's up? How's it going?" Eventually, it became like, "How's it going, man? What's up? How's it going?" He was kind of like, and eventually he just was like, "Are you alive? Are you okay? Like, is there anything left in there?" And he was just like, "It's been like a zombie lately." And I made the point to some of my friends and my family, being like, that's not good. Like, you shouldn't have the handshake of a 95-year-old at 45 years old. Like, that's something's wrong. Well, he's working this and da. And I told him like eventually something's gonna happen. Something's sooner. Like it's like, but yeah, well, and like 3 weeks ago I got a call from my father, like, yeah, he had a massive panic attack at work. And I was like, that's about 2 years longer than I was expecting it to, but yeah, that sounds about right, honestly.
Totally.
And finally, we're talking, I'm working through some stuff. I'm going to try to see if I can find a group for him, but just talking on a regular basis about like, what he's going through. What the biggest thing was always catches me off guard in some way, no matter how many times I hear it, is when I talk to guys or, even with, if I have a lot of women for my practice, for my clients for massage therapy, and I have a lot of them, like I'll tell them like, well, this is what we talk about attachment theory and men's work and this, and what a lot of guys do this. And they're like, are you talking about my husband right now? Like, how is this? Like, this is exactly him. Holy crap. And it's like women that have never met each other, and it's the same narrative every single time. But even for the men, very often, they'll say like, oh, I feel like crap. I don't think I can continue like this at this pace. I've had some dark thoughts. And I'll be like, you're not the only one. Like, this is actually a very common thing going on. They're like, really? And it's just something about, I would suspect it's something about social media that is just naturally, biologically intrinsic to the way women operate on a social level that men just don't in the same capacity. That a lot of men are not aware that this is becoming such a big problem, even though it's like the lone wolf thing you said before. Like it feels like it's just happening to me and nobody else understands. And then you go to one of these groups and you're like, 30 other dudes have exactly my life story and all these books I have behind me. How many times I've read a book stories? I'm like, these guys are just, this is my exact child. This is my childhood. This is my high school years. Like, how the fuck were they watching me this whole time?
Yeah.
Only to find out like, oh, it's just a pervasive narrative on a cultural level, on a societal level going across the board. And yeah, I'm just trying to get more men to step forward and do more preventative work and not lead it to that point of saying like, just bottle it up until you explode and hopefully something terrible doesn't happen.
Yeah. It's time. I mean, we're in that moment culturally where it's pretty clear, men need something. And, this kind of work, these kind of conversations, men's groups, these are a big part of the medicine, I would say, of just getting men reconnected to themselves, to each other, and visibly, or, actually shown that you don't have to hold this stuff alone. Frankly, you can get more done in life. You can become more effective, more successful, more loving, the more you learn to take responsibility for your inner world and get it mended, get it healed, to work on it, and then get plugged into community. And you're going to go further, higher, and, frankly, faster. It's what I just see time and time again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I've seen a lot of emails from you about the dating scene.
Sure.
You work with the dating stuff, and there's two things I guess we could point to. One is, I think there's a narrative in the culture. I don't think it's as broad as people think it is. I think it's a very small subsection of just really angry people that are sounding the loudest alarms. This idea that if we start focusing on working on men's issues, then women lose. But even in the case of the dating thing, I think there's something to that where it's like the type of men you want to see showing up on the dates are the type of men we're trying to work on creating for you, or things like that. But I remember some of the emails you sent out and things like you were talking about how you had a mild traumatic experience with an early girlfriend or a date you went on. I don't know if you could recount that story. It was the girl that you put your hand on her hip and she freaked out and you just went like cold ghosted for a couple of days, something like that.
Yeah, this was earlier in my journey when I was still pretty dissociated from myself. I was a super late bloomer. I had not had a lot of experience with women, and touch was not a big thing in my life growing up. Gotcha, and so a shadow of my nervous system was I was desperate for it. Yeah. Like just literal touch. And so finally, I'm out on a date with someone. We've been out a couple times. We're connecting, and I'm just really enjoying it. And I'm like there's a hungry vampiric part of me that's just like, fuck, I've never had this before. And I want more and more and more. And lo and behold, that was a version of my not being attuned to her, the moment, the environment. And so we get out of this show and, I put my arm around and she just shoves me, like, get off of me, pushes me across the sidewalk. And immediately I just completely collapsed into about a 4-year-old boy who was just devastated and didn't know how to talk about what was happening for me. And, the honest truth was, in that moment, she was like, it's not that I don't want that. It's just too much right now, because it wasn't me, the adult man, coming in for touch. It was this totally deprived little boy who was showing up in my nervous system. And the moment she shoved me, it triggered all kinds of things in me. And I collapsed. I could barely talk. It was the most awkward ride home ever. It was basically the end of that interaction and that relationship. Not even totally because of what I did, but how my nervous system reacted. Yeah. Right? She was like, well, I don't want to date a little boy who can't handle any feedback. And so that was, a big impetus to going much deeper into my nervous system and seeing like, okay, what is fueling all this? And I had to do a lot of deep shadow work and nervous system work to get in touch with these younger parts of me. But again, the lesson's right there in it. It's not that she didn't want the touch. She just wanted attuned touch. And that's, often what I say is, the world doesn't need less masculine energy right now. It needs more healthy masculine energy. And so we should all be celebrating that, because the better the masculine in men is doing, frankly, the better everyone's going to do. Right? Because it's that pathological, disconnected masculine that often causes the largest widespread harm. Right? A man disconnected from his heart will kill people. Period. Like, it's so easy to other people and kill them when you're disconnected from their humanity. And there's a reason, that fuels wars, and we're taught that. And there's a way you can control populations by promoting that, othering people and whatnot. So yeah, I'm a huge proponent of we need more healthy men that have access and connection to their balls and their heart, right? Like, just that simple. Like, They're not the pushover nice guy, and they're also not the domineering macho jerk, right? We want to have that balance of both. And most women I know, when we really talk about it, yes, they're actually craving that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard. It's hard for them to trust it because a lot of times they've opened their hearts to men and they've been dropped or hurt. And so there's a lot of women who I've done shadow work mostly with men, but I've definitely done shadow work with women. And I can tell you, man, some of the things that women are holding is fucking terrifying. The physical abuse, sexual abuse, it's pretty gnarly. And for a lot of women, the question isn't if they've been sexually abused, but when. Did they have some kind of experience? And frankly, a lot of men too. It's way underreported for guys. The more work I do, the more it's like, oh yeah, just like dominoes, guys come forward with stories. So it's not easy for either side. Let me just put it that way.
Yeah.
It's hard for both, and we want healthy versions of both men and women because big part of why I do the work I do is I think healthy men help create healthy relationships, which create healthy families, which create healthy kids, which create a healthy world. Like, just that simple.
I'm of the impression more and more nowadays, and I'm sure the numbers are going to skew more and more as we go along, but that we are 20% words, 80% body language, and that there is an undertone to the narrative that is like referred to as the mind reading fallacy. Which is like, well, I can't read your mind. I can't. But then the question becomes like, well, how much more could you read if you were able to like start attuning to what the person's saying and doing? Like with massage therapy, I keep bringing it back. It ended up kind of segueing because I've had a lot of people tell me I should be a therapist because I'm very, very attuned to the person I'm working with to the point that's like they won't tell me something hurt and I can pick up on it right away within like a second. The facial expression, body twitch, foot starts to move, they're tensing up. Like it could be like a hair or something like they'll make a sound while they're face down. I'm like, is that all right? You're like, how did you know? I was like, you literally just told me. But I have to be extremely aware of what that means. 10 years of doing this, you've got very good sensitivities to this type of things. But I think a lot of guys, they don't realize how much they're in their own head and how much information is being signaled to them externally because they're so disconnected from what's signaling on. I know
Totally.
you're a pupil of Dr. Robert Glover. I jumped on an AMA with him about a week or two ago. And I was thinking about this, and after reading his book, I was talking to him about how I had a time at the gym maybe like 6 months ago where I was working out on the bench. I was doing some stuff with some dumbbells, and there was space in front of me to like put the weights off to the side. Like to the left was light weights, to the right was the heavy weights. And there was a girl to my right with some light weights doing her stuff. There was plenty of space behind me to go put the weights back. And there's not a lot of space in front of me to put the weights back in front of her. And she, like 3 times in a row, she walked right in front of me. And I think like 5 years ago, I'd be like, well, that's an interesting coincidence. And now it's like, okay, I think she was trying to tell me something. But beyond that is also the question of like, well, she just, like, if there's a conflict in a relationship, it's like, well, you should just tell me what's wrong. It's like, if you really slow down, like you're telling each other without even telling each other. There's so much going on in the body language there. But again, the point being of the more we get disconnected from ourselves, the more we don't learn to communicate through body language and then learn to read the cues, read the tells, and how much more would be said. But I think there is a certain degree of fear in women, justified too, that like if you're not with a man that you can trust, that is in connection with himself emotionally, that he can contain himself or at least like manage his emotions, that can know how to read himself, can read you well, like that it ends up stoking a lot of fear, stoking a lot of anxiety in her. She may not be able to identify why she's feeling it, but she's feeling it for some reason. Like in your case, you mentioned how she pushed you away because she was like, no, I don't want a 4-year-old, I want a man. And without her even realizing it, she could pick up the difference instantly in that moment. And she may have had some stuff going on in her own shadow and things like that too, but the fact that like you were that vampiric touch starvation really was present, showed through so heavily without you even saying a word.
Totally.
And then most guys will say, well, she's just crazy, she's this, she's that, and you're like, no, you reek of desperation. Or you did, at least.
It was my responsibility to tend that part of my nervous system.
Yes.
So I could come at her with consciousness and attunement, again, which is a large part of masculine leadership, is leading with what we want, but then listening and noticing the impact. So where it becomes domineering, controlling, damaging is, this is what I want and what is going to happen. And we disconnect from the impact. And so, yeah, we end up overriding a woman or the environment, or like just countless examples, other men. The practice is, being really present, bringing forward with what we want, and then seeing the impact on what's happening around us. Oops, okay, maybe you probably do this in the therapy. I just worked that muscle, and wow, their body tightened up. There's clearly pain there. So I need to scale back that a little bit, maybe work somewhere else first. It's, the metaphor I often use is it's kind of like surfing. I know I want to get there, but I can't just barrel there. I actually have to be and read and work with the wave, right? There's having a sense of direction and intention, and there's listening to the environment and working with it. Because if I just want to go there, I'm going to eat shit, right? The wave's going to knock me right over. And so that attunement, that capacity, it's a big part of, I work with men on, learning to cultivate deeper presence. What does it mean to actually be in your body in the moment? Not so full of thoughts that we can't actually be present, right? And, the research shows, right, that bundle of nerves, the vagal nerve, that goes from the base of our head all the way down throughout our body, right? It's the kind of primary communication channel. They did it, right? They can do the directional assessment. And guess what? Only 20% of that highway is devoted to body, or to brain to body. 80% is body to brain. So if we're not in our body, we are missing out on a tremendous amount of information that we can use to successfully lead and navigate in the moment. That's something a lot of men get wrong, right? But the more we get into our bodies, the more we can be attuned, the more we can feel people, the more we can feel our environment, the more connected to our intuition we are. And again, the more effective leaders we become. So it's a huge deal, right? For us guys. It's not like, just you're going to feel better. It's like, I'm not kidding when, I work with guys, even if it's just on dating and relationships, and 3 months in, they're like, I just got a promotion at work because their nervous systems were shifting. They were more present. They were more calm. They were more capable. Lo and behold, they become more trustable. And when you're trustable, people want to give you more responsibility, which often comes with more money.
Yeah. I know personally, one big, blow my mind moment was early on in this whole thing, in my own work into the men's work. It's only been about 8 months now I've really been into it, was realizing that I have this subconscious radar for women with father wounds. I've been like, every one of my successful relationships was with a woman that had some kind of absent father in her life, either divorced parents, or either the divorce, but the father wasn't in a healthy position. It was always like he ran away, or he was a piece of shit, or cheated on the mom, or whatever it was. And to the point now, like that, even sometimes during massage therapy, I've had some women come in that, like, sometimes like they're attractive, but sometimes I'm like, wow, she's like 1 or 2 sessions, she's really cute. Actually, kind of, she's a kind of nice person. And also in session 3, like, my parents divorced when I was 5. And I was like, how the fuck do I keep seeing this over and over again? But realizing, like, holy shit, there's literally like a subconscious radar going on in my head. It's picking up on body cues, on tone of voice, on language, on word selection, on posture, and things like that. That is then sending me like, oh, she's cute. Why? Because there probably hasn't been dad in your life. Like, I promise you, it's probably that. To the point that I'm now very aware of it. So if I'm stepping back into the dating scene, probably about a couple months from now when I move down south, that I'm aware of the fact that I will have, if I want to have like a long-term healthy relationship, it has to be there with somebody who has done the work, that like they have maybe broken family but did the work, or somebody who actually still has a healthy father figure in their life, and I have to attune to them. Like, because I've been with women before where it's like 2 or 3 months, I'm just like, just not feeling it. But your dad's a really nice guy, but I'm just not feeling. I don't know what the problem is. And now looking back, I was like, oh, I was literally like scared of him on some weird subconscious level. I was afraid of like not living up to his standards or something like that, which meant I kept finding him. We didn't have to impress them. And then
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be me saying like, listen, I like you, and I'm going to feel a little weird for a while, and it's not you. It's completely me.
Yeah.
Here's my history. Here's what I want to do in the future. Just let myself acclimate to the idea of not being a white knight for once. That's a big one. It's just like, I'm just trying
Yeah.
way too much to be a white knight. Like, I need to find broken people so I can fix them and feel good. It's like, it's very often it's going to fall and collapse in your face. Yeah.
Almost always. Yeah. You'll keep playing out that triangle over it. Well, as you know, it's no news to you, right? And that's why.
What's the triangle?
Like hero, victim, and villain.
Oh, yeah. For that one before.
Yeah, you know, there's a version of that probably got patterned into your nervous system from your childhood that, you know, there's a way you've figured out you get to be a hero.
Yeah.
And the truth is, though, when you're a hero, that has to put the woman into a different role. And that's ultimately not going to be super sustainable.
So then, okay, what's hero, victim, villain, right? So what's the healthy?
There is a version of it. I can't think of the words right now. It's something like coach something and something else. But point being,
like the
you already, you like already, I think dialed in. The important thing is the more you do your work, healing your attachment wounding, seeing these patterns, the more you're going to be attracted to and attract partners who are also healing theirs. Because inevitably, you know, I don't know, you take this if you will, you're going to attract someone who has some of that patterning. But the difference is you're going to attract someone who's working with it and realizes, actually the opportunity you and I have here is to take responsibility for our side and repattern this thing from our nervous system we've been trying to complete or get completion on since we were kids. And once both partners have taken responsibility and are conscious, it's like, man, sky's the limit in terms of what you can create. It's beautiful.
Yeah. It's still. I get a lot of people. I think that's like older generation. I think I see it more of, not always. That there's this overcorrection. I would say in the older generation, it's suck it up, get over it. Childhood was 30 plus years ago. Why are you still thinking about it? Younger generation is all my feelings, all my emotions, all the time. Holy crap, everything's terrible. Here's my trauma. Here's my trauma. Here's my trauma. And there is something in the healthy middle of like, well, no, there is something in childhood, but at the same time, you can't not show up to work because you're trauma or something, whatever it may be. Like there's something in the middle there. But for me, it's definitely been, it's still like, it still kind of blows my mind. It's like how many times I've heard a story of like a person I'll work with, either for massage, whatever it may be. And very often I get the people who go like, well, I don't know why they're like this, and this, and this. I'm like, what was his dad like? Oh, his dad was a piece of shit. I'm like, here it is. Okay, what was his mom? She left, and the sister was this, and the dad was that. And what I hear very commonly is, how are you this old and you're still acting this way? That's a big one I hear. It's like, well, how is he 50-something and he's still acting like he's 10 years old? I don't know what the hell the deal is. I had a moment with my sister. She's a school teacher, and she did a lot of work herself. She's kind of like climbed up the top of the hierarchy. She's doing very well, administration. And I remember her telling me a story. It was so funny about there was a group of people, adults, that they were involved in handling the students, kindergarten. I think it was K through 2, kindergarten, like getting them to their classrooms in the morning. There's a whole committee that had to like make sure they were sorted off the buses properly, because otherwise they just scatter like little monkeys and do whatever they want to do. And something happened where somebody left the committee, the person was in charge, and there was like a fight for power, and there was like screaming and all this nonsense going on. And she was telling me about it. So I'm like, yeah, because you're working with children. She's like, no, like these are full-grown adults. I'm like, no. Children. They're literally acting like children. Like that nervous system, like you said before, it rewires back to like instantly I was 4 years old again. Like that was there this whole time. And a lot of people will look at the people, like the men or women who are acting in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and they're still acting like they're 10 years old. Like, yeah, because they never were shown how to grow up or how to like stand in a healthy adult frame. They didn't, like, if nobody taught you, how are you supposed to know? I think there's this feeling of like, you just get a download once you hit 18 years old and you're an adult. It's like, no, we have to be taught. We have personalities. We have some degree of programming built into us, but a lot of it has to be demonstrated, or you're not going to be able to carry into adulthood. Yeah.
There's everybody carries some kind of developmental wounding, and part of our work is just taking responsibility for that and getting in there and tending those parts, right? So that, we don't react from the place of that wounded kid, but we can instead relate to that wounded kid inside of us, which allows us to respond to the moment very differently. And that, that's deep work. It's a deep process. But the second we do that, man, life becomes a lot more freeing. And suddenly you're not having shouting matches like, 10-year-olds, or grabbing a woman because you're so desperate for touch that you're totally missing the signals that, hey, just slow down a little bit, man. Just slow down a little bit, as was my case.
Yeah. I remember recently I went out to breakfast or lunch with my stepsister and her husband. We're talking about some stuff with the family, and at some point we're about to leave, and the husband was talking to me. While he was talking, I saw her, and she was just like lightly like rubbing the back of his neck and his back of his shirt, and I could literally feel my body like, oh my god, I missed that. I know exactly what that feels like. Holy shit! But just again, biological non-negotiables, physical touch. It's just like things like that. It's like no amount of making more money or this is going to change the fact that like it just feels really fucking good to get a hug or get to have somebody just hold your hand or whatever it may be. And looking back over the years myself, same thing. It's just like holding hand, get a hug, cuddling, whatever it is. Like no amount of money or thing or success in life is ever going to replace those baseline needs. But sometimes it was interesting just to feel myself go like, I had like a shiver hit my head when I saw her doing it. I'm like, oh my god, I missed that. Holy shit. But realizing, okay, there's a little bit of touch deprivation going on. The next person I meet, I can't assault them. They're like, I need you to hug me. Like, holy shit, no, calm down. Put your hand on me, whatever it may be.
Again, another crisis for men is the lack of touch. Touch between men is generally not allowed, right? It's labeled homosexual and kind of beat out of us. So we lose that avenue. And then again, society, the way things have played out, there's a huge lack of it. I work with guys who have not had touch for decades or their whole life.
Yeah.
All right. And they learn to survive without it. And, I think we're starting to see some culture respond to that with cuddle parties and cuddlers and just this idea of, this is a human thing we need to be nourished with. And for men in particular, I think the more that comes online, the more we get to start to differentiate touch and sexuality. Because for a lot of men, they're fused together that, that's the only place I get touch. So touch is sexual and has to be sexualized. And actually, there's so much more space when we pull that apart, frankly. And then, when they are teased apart and we find ways to healthily get our touch needs met, lo and behold, what do I see? Men get into much healthier relationships and dive into things that are nearly as destructive as they might otherwise, when it's like, well, right now my bargain is I either take this whole thing, as dysfunctional it may be, or I get no touch. So I'm going to go into this dysfunctional thing. But when some of those needs are being met elsewhere, it's like, oh, well, I don't have to go into that. I don't quite have the same urgency or need.
Yeah.
And so it leads to a lot of healthy behavior for sure.
Yeah. I don't know if there's any last touching points you wanted to put out there before we wrap things up.
Touching
points,
I'll just share if it's all right with you, if like this inner nervous system stuff, whether it's childhood or reactivity, I work with this stuff in what I call shadow work, which is like the process of bringing that stuff to consciousness. Like I said, to be able to move it from being our identity to being part of our identity we can relate to, which gives us so much more freedom.
Separation.
And so, it's something I love to do in groups of men. It's the fastest, most potent place I've seen that work happen is in a group. So you can do shadow work with me anytime. You can just check out my stuff at evolutionary.men. If that's something you're like, I don't know what that is, but I feel like there's something there, reach out and we can talk about it.
Awesome. Jason, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate this.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Michael, and creating spaces like this.
Awesome.